Hello and welcome to SpyHards podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, taking a scenic tour of Glenkirk.
Well, let's put a pin in all things scenic tour and all things Glenkirk, because I think it's a good idea to discuss kind of what's been going on behind the scenes here at the show a little bit recently. Now, for those of you who don't know, we often record our episodes quite far in advance and sometimes out of sync, just because of guest schedules and things like that. But this is actually the first time Cam and I have sat down microphone to microphone transatlantically to talk about a spy movie in over, I believe, 6 weeks at this point.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
And Cam, why is that?
Well, we went on vacation. You were going to Las Vegas to get married. I was there as well. And we were also there for the Star Trek convention. So that was 10 days in Las Vegas? And people, 10 days in Las Vegas, think about it. There wasn't much left in the tank after that. But then I headed off to California for a few days to attend, Quentin Tarantino's movie theater, the New Beverly, go to the motion picture museum there, as well as see the Bond in Motion exhibit at the Peterson Car Museum. So, yes, it was a very busy 2 weeks. And Scott, you were with me for the 10 days in Vegas, as well as settling into newlywed life.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. And I will just say, it's much nicer to see you on a small screen in front of me on a laptop that I can close instead of in person. I can't just, shut your face down.
When I saw you in person, I just started screaming.
Yes. But yeah, fair play to Cam, and I do want to thank you on the air. You gave a speech at my wedding, and you can be assured, folks, it was full of puns about spy movies, including a reference to at least Condor Man, as far as I remember.
Yeah, Condor Man, and I'm trying to think. I acknowledged some of the interviews we've done, like Jacqueline Bisset.
Was there a Remo Williams The First Adventure thing in there? Because that would have been a gold joke if not.
Oh my god! I mean, maybe it's just no, I didn't have a Remo Williams reference, but maybe that would have been kind of like a dark note to set off on the wedding, where it's like the adventure begins, and we know where the Remo Williams franchise went.
Oh yeah, and will remain most likely. Although for my birthday, you did actually give me the first Remo Williams book, which I've yet to read because I slept on the plane home. I imagine if I had started reading it, it would have even sent me into a faster sleep. So.
I don't know. I mean, there's 100 novels, so there's got to be something there, right?
Hey, there's hundreds and hundreds of CSIs out there. Are they any good?
Yes, the original CSI was awesome.
Oh, okay. Cam's a big CSI cyber fan, I can tell.
And also, I actually gave you a Condor Man activity book.
Which I've yet to decipher. I've stared at it intently. I'll have to post some photos online because I can't quite figure out how kids are supposed to navigate this book, let alone adults.
It's basically, how would you describe it to people? It's basically
like a shading book.
A shading book of black and white images of Condor Man, but when you actually look at the pages, it's just like a swirl. It's just like a swirl pattern over the whole page, and you can't see anything at all.
It just reminds me of those paintings that were really popular in the 90s. I think Elaine's employer on Seinfeld has one in the office and stares at it for the whole episode. I think everyone else gets it really straight away, but he can't figure it out.
Yeah, that's right. The I can't remember what they're called, like the 3D puzzles.
Yeah, like you have to stare at it a certain way to get it to come through. But I mean, I just want to take a quick aside at the start to say it's been a strange month and a half, but it's been great to see Cam again in person, and I think we'll be doing the same thing again next year. But I'm looking forward to getting back to our regularly scheduled programming.
That's right.
And speaking of Cam, what are we talking about?
We are tackling 1959's The 39 Steps, the remake of the Alfred Hitchcock 1935 classic.
It's interesting that you say the remake of the Hitchcock classic and not the readaptation of the book.
It's because like almost all the plot elements came from the Hitchcock movie. Like if you read the synopsis on Wikipedia of the 39 Steps book, this has really no bearing on what this movie is. Like this is the Hitchcock movie.
Yeah, that's what I've read too. I should read the book at some point, actually, because I really did enjoy the Hitchcock version.
Look, you've got 100 novels of The Destroyer to get through.
It will destroy me by the end. But I suppose, because this is actually a strange one, because we started this sort of series throughout our show of doing a movie and then doing the remake a couple of months later. When we first did the 39 Steps back in our early months of SpyHards a couple of years ago now, we hadn't come up with the idea for that sort of programming. So we figure we're just going to do all the other 39 steps at some point throughout our life cycle, however we last, however I can stand seeing Cam's face, and he can stand hearing my voice every week.
As long as you're not busy reading Destroyer novels, whatever time you can spare.
Yeah. You'll probably find me on a train immediately to Edinburgh.
Yeah, like I and it was interesting because like the 1970s version, which I haven't seen, but is a little more well known or at least more publicly available than this 1959 version.
Mm-hmm.
I hope all of you were able to find this version. It is on YouTube, but there's a better version on archive.org because I found the YouTube version, the audio goes out of sync about the last half hour.
Oh.
The archive.org version does not. So for those of you who found it, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed it. For those who haven't yet, archive.org is the best place to look.
Well, if you're having trouble finding it, just drop us a DM on social media and we'll send you a link to the archive. Actually, we might just put it in the show notes below as well, Cam. Make it easy for people.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, so if you want to stop and watch the film and come back to the episode, by all means. If you've seen the Hitchcock version, maybe you've got an edge on what's going to happen here.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me, like the 70s version is easily available to me. Like it's on all the, streaming services, whereas this 59 one is not.
I mean, there's some names in this film that I've recognized, but I think the cast of the 70s version is a bit stronger.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Like recognizable actors who've appeared in a lot of things we love. Like Kenneth More, the star of this 59 version, I've seen in a number of things, like A Night to Remember and things like that, but he's not like a big marquee name, and he's easily the biggest star in the movie.
I just had a weird flash when you said A Night to Remember of the song Oh What a Night. But instead of it being like about night as in nighttime, but it's about like a Night of the Round Table and like a Weird Al Yankovic remake of that song. I don't know why that came to my head or why I even told you.
Wait, are you just thinking of Tournament of Kings when we went in Las Vegas to the medieval times themed restaurant?
See, now I'd like a ye olde version of Oh What a Night.
What song is that?
Oh, what a night, late December back in 63.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one.
Right. No, A Night to Remember was a sort of a docudrama about the sinking of the Titanic.
Wow, those contrasting tones there.
A real car crash of tones going on right there.
I don't think the band were playing that on the Titanic on the way down. Yeah, we're back, baby. We're back. Well, I guess it's time for your letterboxd.com synopsis, and it's a weird one. The 39 steps. Hide your kids. Hide your nanny. Hanny's back in town.
What? Why would you hide your kids from Hanny?
I just made that up. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. What the hell? What does that even mean?
I mean, we've had stranger letterboxd.com synopsis than that.
That's true.
At least, yeah. Hopefully that stays with you when it comes to this film.
And they're also really assuming that everyone 25 years later knows Hanny. Just drop of the hat. Oh, yeah. No problem. Of course,
Hanny.
That iconic character that I love. Yeah.
Look how Hanny is back. No, okay, I'll try it again. Serious Scott time. I'll put my trailer voice on. The 39 Steps. The most suspenseful manhunt in history. In London, a diplomat accidentally becomes involved in the death of a British agent who's after a spy ring that covets British military secrets.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that pretty much sums up what the movie is. Maybe not the tone of the movie, but in terms of a boilerplate, what is this movie about? Well, there it is.
I prefer my version.
I do too.
Well, it's going to be a weird pivot, but I haven't got a funny non sequitur to take us there. But Cam, why do we have a remake of the Hitchcock film?
Well, okay. So apparently, Alfred Hitchcock had considered remaking the 39 Steps himself. His co-writer on the movie The Wrong Man from 1956 had sort of Angus MacPhail was the writer's name, had pitched like remaking 39 Steps to Hitchcock, suggesting it as sort of a worthy follow-up to The Man Who Knew Too Much remake. I guess like this writer assumed that Hitchcock wanted to remake all of his old classics and was like, "Hey, you should redo this one." And so like Hitchcock, he wasn't like, exploding with enthusiasm about doing it, but he was kind of like curious. So he investigated where the film rights were at that point, and he just realized like the 1935 film rights were held by the Rank organization, which was a conglomerate founded by industrialist J. Arthur Rank, began in 1937, and it was the largest film company in the UK. And he just realized like they held the rights. This was just going to be kind of a headache to deal with. Hitchcock is working in America at this point. So it just, I don't even know if he cared that much. I think he was just kind of like, oh, I could investigate that. Oh, the rights are busy. Whatever, moving on. He went on and did like Vertigo and North by Northwest. I think Hitchcock did just fine.
Yeah, I think he did some successful films after the 1930s.
Yeah, just a couple. Just a couple. But the Rank organization, like a year or so later, maybe because Hitchcock had expressed interest, were like, we should remake the 39 Steps. And so they recruited director Ralph Thomas. Now, Ralph Thomas had started his career first as a clapper boy in like way back in the
I've been one of those too sometimes, to be fair.
Way back in the 20s. And then he'd become a journalist, and he did edit a couple movies in the mid-30s. Before moving into directing later on in like 1949 with the rom-com Once Upon a Dream. And he had like one of those careers where when you look, he's made like, 30 movies. You're not really familiar with many of them. None of the names jump out at all, but a couple of things that I picked out that were of note. He did a 1956 comedy called The Iron Petticoat, starring Bob Hope, SpyHards' favorite.
Oh no, this isn't going well.
And I should say it was Bob Hope with Katharine Hepburn, so that's quite a combination.
Okay. That brings us up at a point.
Yep.
Bob Hope is definitely the albatross around Hepburn's neck.
He also made a adaptation in 1958 of A Tale of Two Cities. And then he was behind this franchise I'd never heard of, the Doctor series. Most of them starred Dirk Bogarde. And they were movies, there was I think 5 of them. And there was Doctor in the House, Doctor at Sea, Doctor at Large, Doctor in Love, Doctor in Distress, and Doctor in Trouble.
There was a 6th one, I think.
That's 6, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, there was a 7th one then.
Oh, what was that?
Doctor Who.
Doctor Detroit.
Sure. That was a really bad joke on my part. So I'm so sorry, everyone.
Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like there was kind of these lightly sort of romantic comedies about a doctor who got into all sorts of things.
Time and space.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. We'll have to do the Doctor series on the Patreon.
Dr. Hards.
That's right. And
it's
he
not
had made
what you think.
And this movie was his follow-up to another Dirk Bogarde film called The Wind Cannot Read, which is an amazing title.
What a cuss. What a slanderous comment against the wind. What have you got against Mother Nature? It's too breezy in here. You can't read.
Maybe he's talking about the wind from The Happening, where it is basically like an entity chasing people down.
The way to defeat the big bad is to give it a book.
Yeah. So like, as I said, like this guy's career leading into 39 Steps, he's working with movie stars, he's making things of note. Obviously the Doctor franchise must have been successful at this point in time, but they aren't things that have aged particularly well when you look at the list, right? Nothing really jumps off the page. But I did make a lot of notes though. Post this movie, he went on to become something of a spy icon. He directed movies like Hot Enough for June, Deadlier Than the Male, Some Girls Do. So he was, pretty important in the Euro spy world, and just had not really done any of those leading up to this. But maybe this is his first step into espionage, really.
Wow, we're crowning a new champion that we'll be talking about many more times on the show.
Yeah, yeah.
Potentially.
And he wrapped up basically his career in 1980, but he has a pretty significant filmography, and he worked on a lot of these movies with producer Betty E. Box, who also produced this movie. And she would go on as well to work on those spy classics that I mentioned.
Okay. Well, there is some pedigree here, and I do have a new a section I'd like to bring up as part of the primer that I'm going to do from now on.
Okay.
It's called Spy Connections, and I'm talking about actors in the film.
Right.
Now, there's 3 that I could find, although there may be more. Can you tell me which ones have been or will be in other major spy films?
Brenda Banzie was in The Man Who Knew Too Much remake. She was the woman who'd helped in the kidnapping, who had the change of conscience.
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess Kenneth More is in something.
He may be. That's bad research on my part. But we've got Faith Brooke. Do you remember what she's from?
No.
She is from Eye of the Needle. She is the mother who tries to tell her daughter about what is expected on the wedding night.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I did not pick up on that one.
No. And the other one you've got is a film we haven't tackled yet, but we really should. It's Mr. Sidney James, a comedy legend here in the UK, and he is basically in all of the Carry On films.
Oh, okay.
So you'll see him in Carry On Spying.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Carry On, because, Ralph Thomas, his kind of concept for the movie was to reframe it more as something in the comedy vein, jumping off of Hitchcock. And I saw a lot of reviews actually mentioning it as like Carry On Spying. I saw references to this in regards to this movie. And apparently Ralph Thomas approached Hitchcock and basically wanted his blessing about remaking the 39 Steps. And Hitchcock said, "If you have the chutzpah to do it, you go ahead, my son, and do it. You won't do it as well as I did it."
Well, that's a blessing, isn't it? That's, how do you... Yeah, I guess you could... Well, I guess he was correct.
Yeah.
Spoilers. But, I mean, this guy was already sort of an established director. And he went to probably like the king of directing at that point, or one of the kings, surviving kings.
He'd be up there, yeah.
Got the blessing, but the guy kind of gave him one of those like backhanded compliments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. What way to build the guy up.
Yeah, no kidding. And like Ralph Thomas was recruited, he was under contract by the Rank organization. So I don't even know if it was like this is my dream project versus under contract. The studio wants you to make it, and you're a bit of a company man, because you look at his filmography, he's bouncing all over the place. So that may have just been the case. And he was working with a script by a writer named Frank Harvey, who was an actor, writer, and playwright in the British film industry. And he'd started as a film actor in 1938 on a TV movie called The Moon in the Yellow River. And it's listed on IMDb as a TV movie. And I was like, were there TV movies in 1938? Apparently there were.
I swear there was only like one channel back then as well.
But like TV in like houses, the popularization of that I thought was more the 50s.
Now I'm confused. See, actually, most of the pictures I ever see of the war is people listening to a radio. So
yeah,
I'm not sure this was a TV movie.
I don't understand that credit on IMDb. Yeah,
maybe it was like played on TV and people just took it as a TV movie.
Maybe it was like something seen in an archive forever that just aired as a TV movie.
Yeah, like it had one showing in theaters and then really got picked up as a TV movie.
Yeah,
that's strange.
I didn't get that either. But that was kind of his breakthrough. And then he moved into screenwriting, sort of tangentially first in 1940 when a play he wrote called Saloon Bar was adapted to the screen. But then he started doing dialogue work in the film industry and then documentaries. And then in 1948, he wrote the movie My Brother's Keeper and had kind of a string of credits. Again, like Ralph Thomas, nothing that was particularly jumped off the page to me. This is his follow-up to 1959's war drama Breakout. And he didn't really work that much longer after this movie. He basically ended his career in the major motion picture industry with the 1963 Peter Sellers comedy Heavens Above, and then went and worked in TV for a few years, and that was kind of it. But I think it's notable because a lot of the movies we talk about on the show have a lot of say crossover talent from the US or something. This was very much a British film with a British director, British writer, British studio, putting this movie out. And I don't know if we have that many of these. I mean, I guess the original 39 Steps, that would be the case as well. But yeah.
Well, I imagine there's a lot of those 1930s and 40s films that we're tackling are quite British. British Agent, for instance, was, I mean, it's in the title, but that was very much a British affair.
Was it ever?
Well, yeah. I was singing Rule Britannia to the rafters every time I watched that film.
So one thing I thought was really interesting about the credits for this movie, Frank Harvey, cited as, the writer of the film, and John Buchan is acknowledged for writing the novel, but there was zero acknowledgement of the original screenplay by Charles Bennett for the 1935 version, which I have to believe nowadays that would have to be credited, because the whole Mr. Memory thing, the handcuff to the love interest, so many plot elements of this movie came from that version. I think this speaks more to 1950s crediting versus how it would be acknowledged now.
You'd have a story by them, screenplay by this guy.
Sometimes you'll also see now based on a screenplay by X.
I can believe that. But yeah, I would attribute that to just the way they did it at the time. And also, well, I suppose they were both British productions, so there's a good chance that original chap was still around.
And actually, now that I think about it, we covered The Magnificent Seven on the Patreon. That was a movie made in 1960, 1 year later, and they credited Akira Kurosawa for Seven Samurai, that screenplay. So maybe it was just bad form on the part of 39 Steps, 1959.
or it could just be the way the Brits make films and then our rules versus Hollywood, which made The Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, like the Writers Guild of America versus, I don't know what the guild is called over in Britain.
Pass.
Sure. Yeah, so maybe that was just the case. But in terms of box office, I don't know if this movie really played that much outside of the UK. It was almost impossible to track down anything. But I did find a quote that this was the 6th most popular film at the British box office in 1959.
What were some other big films that came out in 1959?
Well, I can tell you the top 3, kind of 4 for that year. Okay. So number 1 was Ben-Hur. That probably would have been number 1 in the UK. That was a worldwide hit. Number 2 was The Shaggy Dog, the Disney movie with Fred MacMurray. And number 3 is, it shifts depending on what chart you look at. It was either Some Like It Hot or the Cary Grant film Operation Petticoat. Now, those two swap places depending on charts, so it's safe to say that they were kind of side by side for number 3.
Okay. Well, those are some pretty big hits. I don't know if the British film industry necessarily followed Hollywood as close as it does now, but I have to imagine stuff like Ben-Hur definitely charted across the pond.
And also at number 7 around there was a little film called North by Northwest.
Yes.
So that probably would have been pretty high ranking at the British box office.
I wonder if this beat North by Northwest and there was like a Hitchcock off.
There's no way. There's no way. North by Northwest must have been pretty high ranking at the British box office, right? Number 2 or 3.
Who needs Cary Grant when you've got Kenneth More?
Well, I would say in terms of those 4 films I named being on the top, 3 or 4, Ben-Hur's gonna carry well across the seas. I don't think Shaggy Dog is, and I don't think Some Like It Hot probably would have as well either. Comedies in that era, especially 1950s comedies, they wouldn't have, I don't think, put the muscle behind opening internationally as much. Whereas Operation Petticoat also, I don't even know if that one would carry other than Cary Grant. Like, I wonder if they would try to sell it off Cary Grant.
Well, Some Like It Hot still gets played on TV here, so either that's just like a late addition to because of just popular culture,
Yeah.
or maybe it did do well here.
Well, we'll have to do a spin-off box office podcast where we delve into the box office origins of Some Like It Hot.
Someone called Scott Mendelsohn.
And just the final little bit I had on this movie, director Ralph Thomas later down the road talked about this movie and said he wasn't particularly fond of it and called it a piece of effrontery that didn't come off.
Effrontery?
Yeah, so I had to Google that one because I wasn't exactly sure how to describe that word. So it basically means like nerve. You know, it's kind of like a bold choice to remake the 39 Steps that didn't come off. That's basically what he's saying.
I fair play. Fair play to the guy for, looking at their own work and going, swing and a miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
fair
that
enough.
sort of sums up the behind the scenes on the 39 Steps, 1959.
Yeah, we're going to have to add a little asterisk every time. 1959, 1959. And then we'll do the 70s one and do the same thing. But Cam, we need to sit down and talk about what we think of the sequel, the remake, the readaptation of the 39 Steps, and answer the question, what is the connection between the Sheik of Bahrain and the Isle of Helena? The Mr. Memory questions were quite good in this one. It didn't have quite the memorable ones that you had in the first version, but
Yeah.
that was the one that jumped out at me. But yes, let's talk about it. Now, I was planning on rewatching the original, but I ran out of time. Now, I do have fond memories of the original. It did, of course, make the knock list. We were both big fans, but it was early days for us, and I think we were perhaps a bit nicer to films in our early days than maybe we would be now.
I would say it's one of Hitchcock's best British films.
Yeah, I don't think I could fight that. I'm more just commenting on how we were in the beginning. But I was a bit hesitant coming into this because unlike, say, Hitchcock redoing Hitchcock like he did with The Man Who Knew Too Much, it's someone else doing a Hitchcock rip.
Yeah.
And I wondered how it would track. And immediately from watching this film, I know they were going from a different tone.
Yeah, oh yeah, the opening music.
Yeah, and the fact that the opening scroll is against steps. Like how like on the nose does one need to be? The 39 steps. There you go. But I wrote down like it's a pleasant watch. I didn't hate watch this, but I felt like really the fundamental thing that makes the 39 steps work is that there's two things I should say. One, there's tension. And two, there is sort of a camaraderie between the two leads.
Right.
A fun sort of connection there. And this doesn't have either of those things.
Yeah.
There is no chemistry between its leads, and the tension, it feels like it plays lip service to the tension and wants to be more of a comedic film for most of the time. And so it wasn't a painful sit. It's 90 minutes. I love it when a film's 90 minutes because it means I've only got to watch 3 hours in total. But I suppose I left going, I don't know if that was worth it.
The first half hour of this movie, I struggled. I was like, oh, I am not liking this. This is like, it almost felt like a TV movie adaptation of the 39 Steps, which it wasn't. It was a theatrical film, but it has not held up the best in terms of film craft when you watch it now. And I'm just like, the first half hour had a lot of goofy musical cues. Kenneth More, completely threw me. Because, Robert Donat in the original has kind of a charm, kind of a worldly quality, and Kenneth More does not. He looks kind of just like... He looks kind of like a bumbler a lot of the first half of this movie.
He's a real Bob Hope.
Get in the barrel. Get in the barrel, Kenneth. So, I was struggling really hard for the first half hour, going I don't even know what to make of this. Now, that said, I found the second, the 60 minutes that preceded that kind of won me over in a way. And I don't love this movie. I think it is more of a curiosity in the annals of spy films. But I think its charm just kind of won me over, like its lightly comedic approach. I think in terms of adapting the sort of the spy espionage kind of mystery plot of the original, it doesn't really work. I found this version actually more confusing for some reason, and also that it just didn't really connect. There was no real tension, as you said, to the mystery. The way they wind up at Mr. Memory at the end is just kind of like, oh, okay, here we go.
Mm-hmm.
It's resolved. But it found ways, I found, to work in interesting side characters or just like fun little like moments. And I thought that like Kenneth More, once I got over the Herculean feat of trying to compare him to Robert Donat, he could kind of make me laugh a couple times. So it was like, as a very breezy, completely forgettable light comedy riff on Hitchcock, kind of enjoyed it, but that's with a lot of caveats.
If you're going to remake a Hitchcock film and you're not Alfred Hitchcock himself,
Yeah.
I almost applaud Ralph Thomas for having a different slant on it. Let's make it comedic. Okay. Sure, I'll give it a watch. And from what I can tell, a lot of the adaptations since, including the stage musical, have all had this more of a comedic slant than the tense version that we had in the 30s. That being said, I don't think they've perfected the comedic formula here. There are some moments of laughter. I do actually think that the Brenda de Banzie like fortune teller section is actually far more fun than the Crofter's wife.
The Crofter's wife is just tragic and like leaves on a real down note where you're like, oh my god, this poor woman.
It's the vision of her husband that's always stayed with me. Just like weary, every day 10 hours he's out in those fields crofting, whatever crofters do. Whereas like you've got this fortune teller, and I think her husband's like they're meant to be like she's his beard or something. I get that vibe from those two.
That, well, I don't know. Does she know she is?
Well, like he even says that what's that chap's name? Sidney James is Percy. Like sees to her needs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, oh my, what does that mean? Oh, husband of mine. Yeah, that stuff worked for me and was fun, but they're like distractions from the plot, which is discovering what the 39 steps are and surviving their onslaught, I suppose, and uncovering this mystery. And when the film went back to that, which is what it's supposed to be doing, it just didn't work.
There is like kind of this interesting undercurrent to the movie about like how Hanny along the way is helped out by the working class consistently throughout the movie. That happens again and again, that they are the people he can rely on versus these, you know, spies in suits and whatever. Like kind of the upper class will always turn on him. When he goes to, you know, the rich dude in the mansion, the rich dude turns out to be the one who's revealed to be the villain. He goes to the police chief turns on him. But when it comes to, you know, the milkman, you know, the fortune teller, as you said, who runs this kind of rundown hotel establishment, the innkeepers at the end, like it happens over and over again. Truck drivers as well. They are the ones that will actually look out for his best interests. And that's not something that was like highlighted as much in the original, because like, yeah, the Crofter's wife helped out Hanny, but the Crofter was not the biggest Hanny fan.
The guy, Hanny even nicked his jacket at the end. Like, no wonder he didn't like the guy.
Yeah. So like, I feel like that wasn't something they were trying to emphasize in the original that I appreciated in this one, that at least it had something it was trying to communicate. Like it had a bit of an angle and a little bit of a message there. But yeah, like I agree. Like I thought the you know, the fortune telling you know, motel owner was probably my favorite character in the movie. Like she was so much fun. I would totally just watch a like spin-off 90-minute movie of her just running her motel. But like I noticed like a lot of, it was interesting because I looked up some reviews on this one, because I was just, this movie's a real obscurity over on these shores. So I was just curious what, you know, reviews had said at the time. And a lot of them cited her as a total distraction in the movie.
Huh.
But yeah, honestly, I was more than down for the distraction.
Well, like I said, like it distracts you from the plot, but the plot's not working. But seeing her there, Nellie, we should call her by her name, good old Nellie, was really fun to watch and see, fun to see her interact with Hanny and her husband. But I don't know, it just didn't It just didn't grab me as well as it should. And you mentioned it in your review, but the ending is so abrupt.
Yeah.
Now, I went back and checked. I did check the plot for the Hitchcock version, and it is quite a quick ending, but they do have to kind of deduce where they're going, and they kind of talk amongst themselves and figure out they have to go back to London and blah 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 blah, and find Mr. Memory, etc. Whereas this, it just feels like he gets it in a second and they're off, and that to me just feels like, oh, is that the runtime coming up? Right, better whip this up, get it back to London, and get the film finished, and that bumped me a little bit.
Yeah, I had a moment when I was watching it, and it was like them handcuffed together in the hotel room, and I was like looking at the counter on the player, and I was like, there's like 9 minutes left. They're going to wrap all this up in like 9 minutes.
Yep.
And they do. It's very speedy. And to be fair, like the original 39 Steps is, I think, like 82 minutes or something. Like it definitely moves at a clip.
Yep.
But it feels like it's sort of a natural ending versus a quick cut to the ending, because I think Kenneth More even just has like this like tossed off line of like, oh right, the palace, and boom, they're at Mr. Memory.
Yeah, because it's the Palace Theatre
Yeah.
where it's playing. But like originally, Mr. Memory is touring, so they stumble upon Mr. Memory at the theatre they go to at the end, and that's where they figure it out.
Yeah.
But although I do find it interesting, I think before we get into likes, usually we're somewhat in simpatico. I think maybe we are in some ways, but you seem to be a lot more favourable on this in sort of a cursory way than I am.
In a it's maybe a 3-star movie versus a 2.5-star movie kind of thing. Yeah.
I wouldn't give it the half, but yeah, okay, sure. But let's not dwell on that. Let's talk about some likes, and let's talk about the comedy. I don't think this story needs comedy as much as maybe little light elements that the original has. But some of the moments do make me laugh. Like the stuff in Regent's Park with Nanny and the Rattler, and like the stroller didn't have a baby in it, and like giving the Rattler to the copper and saying this one's for the chief superintendent or whatever it was. Like that all got little like giggles out of me. Him escaping in the little what do you call a group of people on bicycles? I can't remember what they're called.
Oh, I don't know what you call a group of them, but yeah, there's like all the like kids on bikes. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing like a tour of Scotland, and he's just like escaping in that little uniform he's wearing, which is absolutely adorable. There's like shorts and there's a button-down t-shirt, but stuff like that made me giggle and got little laughs out of me. So that worked.
Yeah, well, I think like it's hard for me to come up with something else I like, because I think that's kind of what it was the tone of the movie in that regard, and it was scenes like that, and how Kenneth More would just kind of like riff off them. You know, there was a lot of like just tossed off lines that kind of made me smile. Even like the tone of the movie is set so, I think, well at the start, even though it took me a while to pick up on what the movie was doing, that there's that shot of the boat, you know, in the water that looks incredibly fake. And then you zoom out and realize it's this very elaborate model that this old dude in a captain's hat is, you know, sailing on like a creek or like a pond, I should say. But like,
that's right. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, like, moments like that, I just think have, like, a charm to them that because the movie... Does the movie care about its, like, spy plot at all?
Well, you always say that comedies are like a clothesline for gags.
Yeah.
And I'd say this is a comedy.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's quite a clothesline for gags. I think there is a plot that runs throughout, but maybe they're not as well connected to each other as they should be.
It's like a clothesline, and you could easily make the argument that like Hitchcock uses his movies as like a clothesline for thrills. You know, there's the whole MacGuffin element of his films of like, you know, what is the 39 Steps? It doesn't really matter. It's that the character keeps going through all these, you know, amazing, you know, set pieces to get to the end point. And you could say the same thing about, you know, doing a comedy like this, that the plot should just carry you through from set piece to set piece. And in a way, I think it does a decent job of that, where as I'm like jumping from like the bikes to, you know, him escaping from the train, all of these various set pieces, it's doing a good enough job connecting them. It's more like, I feel like the original 39 Steps, it had like a punch to it. It had some tension that when you got to the end, you really felt like you'd been on a journey with that character, even though the movie's only 82 minutes. Whereas like this felt more like a stroll in the park. Like the character just kind of felt like he was just kind of haphazardly stumbling from place to place. It didn't feel like someone who really had his wits about him the way that like the Robert Donat character did.
Well, I had this in my dislike section, but I think it connects very well. One of my problems with the Kenneth More, Richard Hannay character in this film is he just feels like he's above everything. Like it's just a bit of a jaunt for him.
Yeah.
He's having a nice day out. He's never really about to be killed. The problem is it reminds me of that character from the Man from U.N.C.L.E. remake film, Henry Cavill. He just feels completely above it. Everything just sort of brushes off of him. It never really holds him under any tension or any weight on his shoulders. Whereas the Donay character, the original Hannay, much as he had like quips about what was going on, he kind of like raised his eyebrow from time to time. Especially when he was on the run in handcuffs, you felt like those coppers were right behind him. The helicopter was coming for him. There was a sense of doom, and this film didn't have that.
No, and it's like Kenneth More, I think, is funny throughout, so I would put him in my like column, and that I liked his kind of persona by the end. It's such a weird conflict for me with this movie, because like the things I like, there's also issues with it. So like Kenneth More, I liked his persona. Once I kind of got over the fact this wasn't Robert Donat, I was like kind of on board with him, but at the same time I can see how it draws away from the tension of the movie. Like it does kind of hurt it because your lead character doesn't seem, I mean, this man never sweats once. This guy is just kind of strolling around, hanging on the sides of trains, and not the most convincing in the action sequences, to be fair. But like there's never that sense of that kind of white knuckle chase to escape from authorities. He seems like he's kind of just got it down. There's a part, maybe this sums up his entire persona in the movie, when he's hiding in really tall grass or wheat or something like that, and he just starts like eating a picnic lunch. Well, there's like hunters shooting around, and then also the police like going through the, the whole area, and he just like has a nap, and he like wakes up and he keeps on going. There is no sense of like, oh my God, I am on the run.
There's no urgency.
No.
Yeah. I think another I think it's worth mentioning, because we could fall into dislikes, and I want to try and keep it light at this bit. And we've spoken about it briefly already, but I do love the Brenda de Banzie fortune teller character section.
Yeah.
I think that's a highlight of the film. I do just want to ask a question about the comedy, though, and that section is part of the comedy. If we hadn't had seen the original, the 1930s version, would we have enjoyed this more?
Yeah, I would say a little. I don't think we'd be putting this up on the all-timer, of cinema list or something like that. Like, I don't think we'd be being like, sit down, Godfather, we found the next great classic. But I do think don't you think this movie would play incredibly well if you saw it on like TV in the 1980s?
Yeah. Yeah, like a daytime screening.
Yes.
Like 2 p.m.
Oh, not a night. This is not your Friday night.
No.
This is like Tuesday at 3:00.
With a cup of tea and some crumpets.
Yes. Yeah. So like I can see it playing well in that regard. It feels like the kind of movie that, well, there's like those movies that just played over and over and over again when I was, young on TV. Things like, say, Overboard with Goldie Hawn, for example. A lot of those kind of 80s comedies. This kind of has a similar breezy vibe where you can check in at any point and kind of just amuse yourself for a little bit and then check out. So I think we run into an issue with when you're comparing like something to a Hitchcock movie, that is a tough order. And I was doing the mental exercise while I was watching it of actual Hitchcock remakes, how many have worked. And boy, like there's movies that have riffed off Hitchcock. A lot of De Palma movies do, but they're original stories, and he's just taking elements of Hitchcock. I love a lot of those films, but when it came to remakes, there's like the Psycho remake, which was a real, it was an experiment gone awry. We haven't seen the other 39 Steps. There was sort of A Perfect Murder, which was kind of a remake of Dial M for Murder. That wasn't great. I don't know that there's the Rebecca, they called it an adaptation, but it was a pretty close remake of the Hitchcock material as well. With, Armie Hammer and Lily James. That wasn't very good. There's something about the Hitchcock magic that, like, it works to use it as a jumping off point.
Yeah.
It doesn't really work to try to repeat it. And this movie, I guess, to its somewhat credit, doesn't fully try to recreate the original 39 Steps. It more wants to turn it into something kind of light and, kind of silly.
Which is why I think we both mentioned the comedy in our likes section. Despite it maybe not working with the story of the film, we liked the fact that it took a swing.
Yeah.
What about you? I've already said 2 likes. What's something you liked?
Well, I mean, to me, it was like the tone, and it was just nice to see some of the scenery. Like, this movie was actually shot in Scotland, so they actually made use of their locations. There's a sequence where it's him and Fisher just, like, hiding out on, like, like a river. And, like, that scene looked kind of beautiful. Like, it was actually really cool locations that I found very enjoyable, and it gave it more of a sense of the geography of the area. I think the original 39 Steps looks beautiful when you rewatch it, but it's not necessarily being honest to the actual areas they'd be in. So I thought in terms of that element, it wasn't like quite good looking enough to be a really successful travelogue, but I still appreciated that they were visiting, locations that looked a little different.
Yeah, like one of my other likes, which I guess ties into this quite well, is the actual train stunt.
Right.
I think that was well staged, and they actually do shoot some of it on the Firth of Forth Bridge. Like, it's actually, they went to Scotland and shot it. So, like, fair play in that sense, because it definitely adds to that sort of cold, chilly fogginess of Scotland.
Yeah. Like, that's something that I think Hitchcock conveyed pretty well, but he was also not using, like the Scottish locations. So he's kind of more inventing things. Whereas here, it just felt like this movie isn't as artistically bold as what Hitchcock's trying to do. So I kind of liked its kind of just, light approach to its locations, where it was like, let's just convey them as they are and have Kenneth More just strolling through them.
Bumbling around, making quips.
Now, this is not really a positive, but I was blown away when they said that his character was 35.
I didn't catch that. No way.
Yeah.
35?
Yeah.
Wow. I'd literally turned 35 a couple of weeks ago. And, I look a lot more fresh-faced than that boy.
I looked up his actual age when they shot this. He was about 10 years older. But
right.
They are trying to convince you that this man is 35. And that's something that, like, look, it's kind of like an older man energy, even though he's supposed to be 35 in this movie. Robert Donat, there's the part early on where he invites the woman back to his place, the woman spy. And, like,
she doesn't like that word.
That's right, she doesn't. But, like, you can tell Robert Donat has kind of that young, kind of like, oh yeah, I'm bringing this woman back.
He's like cheeky. He's got like a suave nature to him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Whereas, like, when Kenneth More brings that character back to his apartment in this movie, it's very innocent.
Yeah. He's being very sweet to her. Like, he's offering her a cup of tea. I mean, all I really want is for a man to take me home and make me a kipper sandwich, like old Donat does.
Wasn't he like frying up fish or something like that?
Yeah. It was
yeah.
kippers, or it was like mackerel or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the Robert Donat character was like a young kind of guy he knows kind of the city and is someone who's kind of cosmopolitan, a little urbane, whereas, like, the character in this movie seems like a school teacher or something.
He seems like your dad.
He does. And he, like, talks about how he's been away for years, something involving political warfare. And I'm like, that sounds like too edgy a job for this man.
Well, that was actually something that's in my dislikes, and I think we're just sort of drifting over there now.
I find this one so difficult because I'm saying, like, my grade is like a 2.5 to 3 star kind of grade. So it's like the dislikes have elements that I like. The likes have elements I dislike. It's not like some movies where it's very clear cut lines.
Yeah, this is no My Favorite Spy. It's not a slap in the face. Well, I noted down the fact that he has like some training and kind of knows what's going on in the world, and he brings up Boomerang, which is this secret missile project that doesn't exist in the Hitchcock version.
Right.
So, like, his version of Hannah kind of knows what's going on and understands that there is some stakes, or at least what the stakes are, whereas the 39 Steps is just more of a mysterious organization that they're trying to escape from in the Hitchcock version. I just found that addition to be quite baffling, because then he's already kind of relaxed. He's like, oh, I know what's going on.
I was like confounded by the boomerang stuff, because it was like, why are you adding on extra elements that are confusing?
Yeah, because the 39 Steps is meant to confuse you. You're not really meant to think about it too much. It's just meant to be this like mysterious other that's coming for you.
Yeah.
But adding in this like rocket system that they're trying to sell or buy or steal, I don't know.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources, whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a top secret volcano lair. We're putting out the call for your support.
That's right. As you may know, we've activated the SpyHards Patreon, home of our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors, and full film commentaries with more intel than a Basil exposition briefing.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
It's Halloween, Scott, and so we're going to celebrate with Bram Stoker's Dracula. Listen to us, we children of the night. What podcasts we make.
And if that sounds delicious, then become a true spy hard today and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy jinx.
What era was this movie set in? Was it supposed to be set, do you think, in like 1959-ish?
I got the impression it was pre-war.
That's what I kind of got as well, which the original book was set pre-World War I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Hitchcock, made it, that movie's made kind of during the kind of the slow build up to World War II.
Yeah.
And this one, I also got a World War II kind of vibe. The energy and the filmmaking is very like late 50s, but in terms of, I think what it's trying to get across, it's pre-World War II.
Yeah, I just think from the costuming and stuff as well, and what people, and like the nannies and things like that starts to disappear around the 50s and 60s.
Whoa. Are you saying you don't have a nanny?
We've been through this. I have a nanny, because that's what we call our nans,
right?
Cam. And that's my nickname for you, is Cammy, of course. But no, I do not and have never had a proper nanny.
I'm broken to hear that. Like,
no one took me for a stroll around Regent's Park and took my rattler off of strangers.
Yeah. So, I'll just say, like, something I disliked. I've talked about struggling back and forth with the tone and elements like that, but like, there was moments of comedy that really fell flat for me, and one of them that really died on the vine was when he went undercover as the the school lecturer at the all-girls school.
Yeah.
And he's talking about spleen wart, which I don't even know what that is.
It's like a root.
Oh, okay. And he's just like tossing out just gibberish dialogue, and the crowd is in uproarious laughter. And I'm like, there is nothing this man is saying that is even remotely funny.
I think they're just giggling because they know something's up. They're just being schoolgirls. I took a little bit. I did find that kind of funny, like how the teachers are slowly becoming miffed with this alleged lecture they brought in about spleen wart, but it turns out it wasn't the right person. But the way it works in the original is, I think, far better, because in the original, Hanny finds the lady on the train and then goes to like a workers' union meeting, and makes some sort of uproarious speech. But because you can kind of bluff your way through that speech, like workers' rights, he saw the signs on the wall and figured it out. Whereas spleen wart, you wouldn't have any idea. So it just turns into like a stand-up act.
A very unfunny stand-up act. And like, the reason the first one works is because he has to give that speech to like stay safe. Like, there's genuine tension to him having to give that speech. Whereas in this movie, he's just kind of like doing,
what's the deal with spleen warts? They're not spleens and they're not warts.
What is Wayside in the Woods in August?
Yeah, so that did bump on me too.
Yeah.
I just we haven't really spoken about this character apart from my mention at the start, and that is Fisher. We just sort of briefly mentioned her because she is the other lead of this film, the love interest of the film, and the lady who survives to the end. I don't know who Taina Elg is. I'm sure I'll find her again in another film down the road.
I don't know about that. I'm looking at her filmography. Yeah, it's pretty sparse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't think so. I have apparently seen her in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Hercules in New York, aka Hercules Goes Bananas, where she played Nemesis, I guess.
There's a second Hercules film?
Oh no, this was like in the at the tail end of the 60s. Arnold Schwarzenegger, they were trying to make him a star because he was a bodybuilder at that point, and they put him in this like very cheap Hercules movie that's like, you're a fan of The Room. Hercules Goes Bananas / Hercules in New York is pretty on par with something like The Room, and it was a complete disaster, and Arnold didn't really act for a number of years.
So that sort of put him off for a while, basically.
For a little bit, yeah. And he's dubbed over in the movie, and they also changed his name to Arnold Strong.
Arnold Strong.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I'll never see Taina Elg again. That probably leads in well with the fact that I didn't enjoy her performance, I have to say. There's no chemistry between the two of them. She has a moment of delicacy, I think, when she figures out that he's not a bad guy, and there's like little bits about the tights. It's quite cute, and when she slips off the handcuff, it's kind of nice. But she's meant to be this like antagonist in a way to your lead, but like a fiery chemistry between the two of them. It's like tit for tat, and they're meant to sort of bounce off one another. Whereas she's just saying "ouch" and "no" for a very good long time in the film, and it does grate you after a while.
This element doesn't work at all. And it's something I think we really loved the original 39 Steps, but it was something we also highlighted as an issue with that film, which is like the female lead is introduced in a scene where he just like aggressively like kisses her as a cover on a train, and then she disappears from the movie and doesn't show up till like the last like half hour or so. And that was an issue with the first film, but I think, the two characters had a lot more chemistry in that one. And they were also they felt like good sparring partners. Robert Donat was like kind of a young guy. She was like, I can't remember the actress's name, but like she was also, seemed pretty young and fiery, and it just made like a good combination. Whereas it was
Madeleine Carroll.
Yeah, Madeleine Carroll, yeah. So like they just made like for a really good combination of characters. Whereas here, he's kind of, as we've said, like your dad on the run. And she seems like just very sweet. Like she seems like very sweet natured. She's like a teacher at the school. Seems pretty mild mannered. And like when you put the two of them together, she's annoyed, but it's not that like kind of crackling chemistry. And the fact that I'm supposed to buy that there's like a love story happening over the span of like 20 minutes, it's a real tough sell.
And the thing with having this sort of 35/45-year-old man is that he's abducting a 20-ish-year-old girl in this film.
Yeah.
And the Madeleine Carroll character was the same age, but the Robert Donat character was also a lot younger. Whereas this feels like your dad taking his secretary for a spin.
Yeah, because I believe she was about 28, 29 when they shot this movie.
Yeah.
And
the chemistry just isn't there. I think that's the simple way to sum it up, is the chemistry wasn't there. They didn't have that sort of fiery spark between them, especially when they're on the run, because they're meant to have this sort of quips and sort of flirty exchanges that are loaded. But there's none of that here. It's very much shutting him down until she magically falls in love with him.
And I think the issue is, and I don't really blame the actress for this, when you have this little screen time in the movie, just in terms of the screenplay, the structure of the 39 Steps, you have minimal time. And if you're being directed to kind of and being written with a performance and a character that's like kind of passive, kind of sweet, and then just has the kind of the lovey-dovey pivot. And that all happens in like 20 minutes. There's only so much you can do. Like, you would hope that if they're looking at this, they go, okay, we need her to have some real sparks and to have a little more fire so that it's something funny for him to at least bounce off if you are making a comedy. Because it's not really fun watching him kind of like bumble around and make jokes at like this kind of this doe-eyed woman. Like, that's not funny. Like, it's more funny if she's like, fire and brimstone and he's having to kind of react off of that. That could be actually funny.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the problem with the comedy, because it's very broad. And so that doesn't really land for a lot of people, specifically us. So maybe their chemistry was better a long time ago, but it doesn't land now.
And it's interesting if you read a synopsis on the original novel, there isn't this whole like love interest subplot. There's no like handcuffed at a hotel material in the book. So like they're just taking that from the Hitchcock movie. And I think like if you were to remake a Hitchcock film like 39 Steps, you're not going to probably beat him in the style department, but I think you could beat him in like some of the plot structure stuff of the 39 Steps original. And that would be, I think, the handling of the female lead. And I think this movie actually does a worse job. That one also has the same issue, but it just has the chemistry. And so it works. Whereas I think if
you can always get past it. Yeah, you can get past that.
I would have paired them up maybe earlier, maybe worked her into the movie earlier. Like, you can kind of do whatever you want. And to just replicate that did not work here.
I mean, far be it from me to try and tackle a Hitchcock and try and lift that up. So I'm not going to even really try. But I know we said it originally, and it still stays true here. There is not enough time to get the chemistry between the two of them. But it works better in the original.
Yeah.
In terms of other dislikes, I think I've actually mentioned them all. The lack of tension, I think, it really stands out for me in this film. There's no chemistry, as I said. The whole him knowing about weapons was a strange choice. And the whole like Hannah just seeming above it all.
Right.
It felt like it was coming at the work differently, which I appreciate, a different angle on it, something. What if you're going to redo a classic, try and do it differently, see what comes up. But whatever you do differently, try and make it work, because this just doesn't work.
And one element I thought really didn't work was Barry Jones as Professor Logan, the main villain, who has the iconic finger reveal in the original. He has it again here, and that's something that Cloak and Dagger, a Hitchcock riff. Again, I think you can make Hitchcock riffs that really work, whereas I think when you remake them, it's really difficult. But like they have that character here, and just like what a non-entity. Like, he wasn't the most dynamic of Hitchcock villains in the original, but he's even less so here. The only moment of him that like raised my pulse was when he did the the bail off of the balcony at Mr. Memory. I was like, is that old man okay? Because like you suddenly see this like somewhat older looking gentleman just take this like flying leap off of a balcony. It looks crazy.
He's quite portly. He's lived a full and rich life, let's say that. And this man leaps off of the box in the Palace Theatre, and he makes the stage and keeps running too. I have to imagine that's a stuntman in a wig, but it looked good.
The actor was about 65 or 66 when they shot this, so I would hope it was a stuntman.
I don't want to look at his IMDb. You find out he like died a week later from like, I don't know, breaking his knees.
When he did that though, like it was a pretty. I'm sure it was a stuntman, but it was a pretty seamless looking scene. Yeah. So I was like, oh my God, it's Barry Jones.
I did not expect it. No. Yeah, because he just throws himself off. That got like a whoa out of me there.
Yeah.
But you have brought up something that we haven't really spoken about, and that is the return of Mr. Memory, which is one of our favorite moments in the original 39 Steps. Again, a complete made up thing from the original book. But it was fun seeing him again. I don't know if he got as fun questions as I mentioned earlier, but I did have a question for you, Cam, in regards to Mr. Memory. And this is not a knowledge question, trust me. I don't think you're Mr. Memory. But do you think someone today could exist like Mr. Memory?
No, I don't.
Yeah. It's just too much knowledge now.
And also, like, they would say a true fact, and someone would be like, "That's wrong. That's wrong," and you'd be like, "Oh God, oh God,
Oh,
just
there
shut
we
this
go.
down. I can't sit here in this crowd anymore."
I hadn't thought about the fake news angle, but that's a very fair point to make. I just think there's like too much out there, and people could just Google it and be like, I'll think you'll find it's blah blah blah, not blah blah blah.
Yeah,
And yeah, why is that an attraction anymore?
I mean, I don't really know why it was a attraction back then. Really, like, I don't know that I would be that interested in it, but. If I were, who knows? I don't know what entertainment options were like in the.
There's no TV.
Yeah.
Like, what do you have?
Yeah, exactly. You
What
got
do
the
you have?
radio, right?
Yeah.
Although apparently TV did exist if the writer was appearing on TV movies in 1938.
This is true. I did have one follow up question for you from Mr. Memory.
Yeah.
If you were back in the time of Mr. Memory, what question would you ask him to try and stump him?
Oh my God. What's the famous question from Monty Python and the Holy Grail about the sparrow? That's the one I would ask, and I would have done the research in advance.
I was thinking about the Monty Python question too, and I had to look it up for you, Cam. It is, what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
There you go. That would be a great question, and I think it would actually stop the show because he would not have an answer.
I mean, looking at the questions Monty Python does as well, like the what is your quest, and what is your favorite color? Like, yeah, maybe I do that just for jokes, but yeah, I think your swallow question would stump everyone. You would become the true Mr. Memory, even though you have no powers. It's a Highlander thing, isn't it? When you defeat Mr. Memory, you become Mr. Memory. There could be only one.
I have to like throw on the jacket and then get up on the stage, and then I'm like quickly dethroned within the first question.
Sean Connery starts to walk out to tell you what's going on, and just turns around and leaves again. He's like, not this man.
Someone's like, "Do you validate parking?" I'm like,
I mean, we played a game where you had to memorize things on holiday, and you failed that tremendously. So your memory isn't great.
Well, my memory is great for certain things.
Okay.
It's entirely dependent. So
Film trivia you have down, to
Yes.
be fair. Like, someone asked you, like, who won the Best Picture Oscar in 1978.
that was Annie Hall. Yeah.
I'm not going to Google it, folks. I'm going to trust that he's right, and you can let us know if he's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, that's pretty quick off the draw. Like, I wouldn't have known that. Yeah. So kudos to you, Cam, the true Mr. Film Memory.
That's right. That's right.
Did you have any final notes on the film, Cam?
I had, I guess, 3 things I wanted to cite. They're all kind of quirky and kind of weird.
On brand. Go for it.
I'll get the uncomfortable one out of the way. We have Kenneth More doing impressions of indigenous people at one point. That was kind of awkward, where he does it to the psychic woman. I don't know why he was doing that. It was a real out of left field.
Sure.
Another question off of her, though, a more fun question. She references that she was in prison for like 4 years for witchcraft. Like, what?
So I had a little look. There was the Witchcraft Act of 1735, and it was repealed in 1951.
Oh my God, that late?
Yeah. Now, when I say it was repealed, it was actually replaced with the Fraudulent Mediums Act of 1951, which is still in some way used today.
So,
But that's more for like spiritual healers and things like that, sort of mumbo jumbo.
what would Mrs. Lumsden have been thrown in prison for? Like, she seems to just be like a psychic who, reads a crystal ball. Was she conning people? Because I can understand that, but I didn't really get that impression from the movie.
Well, I think they're using a little bit of like film magic and embellishing somewhat. But basically, the Witchcraft Act made it a crime for a person to claim that any human being had any magical power or was guilty of practicing witchcraft. And it had a maximum of a 1 year imprisonment.
So 4 years was quite the make an example.
Unless you did it 4 times. Then you could maybe say that was why.
Okay. Boy, that life was
Yeah.
hard back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're getting serious for a second, I think it has some sort of basis in sort of Christian values and things like that, when they used to have more of a sway on how law was written.
Yeah, I could see that. And like
Yeah.
she is someone who operates kind of on the periphery of society, running the Gallows Motor Mart. That like it does seem like it seems like this little world that he's stumbled into that is away from the norms of society.
Weirdly, that sort of seance center, or whatever you want to call it, has kind of more of like a 50s, 60s vibe to it, like a bit of like psychedelia almost. It's actually weird to see something like that in the 30s when this is set.
I mean, I guess I could kind of parallel it though a little bit with like the psychic scene in Ministry of Fear, which was wartime.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I guess it kind of checks out, but I agree. Well, a lot of the movie looks like the 50s to me. Yes, like the costuming is 1940s, but like it looked like a 1950s movie to me very often.
But she was a bit kooky though. Like she wouldn't let him in if he was a certain star sign, had certain hair
Yeah.
color. Like using all sorts of terms. I don't know if they're racist or not, so I'm not going to say them on this podcast. But I'm not a Sagittarius, fortunately, so I think she would have let me in.
Right. I'm Scorpio, so I would have been okay as well.
Yeah. Virgos and Scorpios. I don't know how they go hand in hand. It's all nonsense to me.
And just my last note, there's the milkman who helps him out earlier in the movie.
Mm.
There's a bizarre moment where the milkman breaks the fourth wall and stares at the camera that I was like, what was that? And
Yes.
I mean, I found most of the accents in this movie I could understand. His was the toughest because whatever
Really?
whatever line he said when he stared at the camera, I rewound it 5 times and I was like, I got nothing.
Well, I was going to save this line, but I'll say it now. Because Hannah says he had to slip in to look at her etchings. And then the guy says, that's what got me caught too. And he goes, was it the same thing? He goes, oh no, that was for, I slipped in to see her budgerigar.
What?
That's a type of bird.
Yeah, that would have flown way over my head. I've never heard that term.
Was that a bird pun?
Like I know what a budgie is, but a budgery car?
Gar. I think it is. It's something. It's a word that's in my head. I don't think I've ever seen one, but like I know it to be like a pet you would have.
Okay, I wonder if we just shortened it to budgie. That might make sense. But yeah, like that line, I listened to it multiple times. I was like, nope, nothing doing.
Well, I can solve this for you. The budgerigar is also commonly known as a parakeet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But the budgerigar is its name.
Well, you learn something new every day.
There you go. Well, we the first 100 we had horse hearts. Maybe now it's bird hearts.
I mean, I think it became bird hearts as soon as we started talking about Condor Man, but yeah.
Yeah. Actually, to be fair, that makes way more sense. That was really all of the notes I had left, except for a note just popped out of my page. There's a small section where they're driving a car whilst they're handcuffed, and it gave me some Wylin and James Bond vibes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On the motorcycle, because she had to sit behind him and sort of wrap his arm around with the handcuff. I'm doing the motion like I'm on a video podcast. This is audio, so you can't see any of this. But yes, I might put a photo of those two next to each other online. It was fun for a second.
That became a bit of a trend of like characters being handcuffed together. Especially characters who had kind of clashing personalities. I think of the Defiant ones with Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis. But yeah, like I think it's a gimmick that can work really well, and it works not so great here, but it works really well in the original.
Yeah, I have to agree. But I think that wraps us up for our notes. You know, we've had budgerigars, we've had hannies, and we've had nannies. But let's talk about knock lists.
Yeah.
Cam, the 39 Steps from the 30s has made a knock list. Is its successor joining it?
No. I mean, I think when I was saying that this is the type of movie that would play well at like 3:00 on a Tuesday afternoon, tough to make the knock list when that's the criteria that depend on you being at your most successful. But like, you know, it's kind of a cute movie. It's kind of fun to sit through. But like, I can't imagine myself ever going back and rewatching this version of the 39 Steps. I can't imagine telling anyone this is the version they should watch first. And I also have a hard time imagining myself if someone was like, I loved the Hitchcock 39 Steps. I can't imagine myself being like, you really need to watch the 1959 remake. It would be more like, if you're really bored, check out the 1959 one because it's kind of silly. That would be my kind of response to that.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. That's one no down to me now. I mean, I'm the same. It's obvious that it was a no for me because I said it was less than your vote. So if yours is a no, mine certainly must be a no. But I'm not even going to go out on a limb and say I would recommend this if someone was bored. I'm going to wait and say I want to watch the 70s version, and then I'll give you where I stand on the 339 steps. I think there's only 3, maybe there's 4.
Well, Benedict Cumberbatch is doing a TV adaptation, I believe, of the 39 Steps. I don't know if it's still going, but it was in the planning stages. So it seems like we could have more versions of this story. And I think there was also like a TV movie version as well, which we probably won't cover. But I did have a question for you. Now that we've watched the original and we've watched this kind of comedic take on the material, does it make you more or less excited to watch the 70s version?
That's a solid question. I think it makes me more excited to watch it because I've seen the highs and I wouldn't say the lows, but I've seen the version I didn't enjoy.
Right.
And it's made me appreciate what I enjoyed about the original. So when I go to watch the 70s version, I can be looking for certain elements to find what I'm looking for. Maybe it is the ultimate version for me.
Maybe.
Time will tell. How do you feel?
I think I'm more interested now to be the completist, the one that has seen like the various versions of the 39 Steps. And I'm also, I think, really curious, and I'm not going to do the research in advance because I prefer to be surprised, but I'm really curious to see if it is a close adaptation of the Hitchcock version of the story versus the novel. That is something I'm really looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. See if it takes some elements from the novel. Maybe I'll read the novel in the meantime because we're not going to tackle this other film for a couple of years, I think, now.
Right.
Gives me plenty of time to get through it after I finish all the Destroyer novels. But there you go, folks. 2 no's. The 1950s version of the 39 Steps is not making the knock list, but the dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. Cammy, the question goes to you, sir. What's up next week?
Yes, we are going back in time to 1941 to tackle the Humphrey Bogart spy thriller, All Through the Night.
Was that another night joke?
No. Are we taking it back to the start of this episode with that song?
Yeah. Oh, what a night. Hopefully I'll be saying that by the end of the film.
Hopefully.
There you go, folks. Your mission, should you choose to accept it for some reason, is to check out All Through the Night with Humphrey Bogart from 1941 and join us next week. If you like what you hear on the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. And do not forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, I would like you girls to take away with you this one splendid thought. Whatever you do, don't fall by the wayside, but more important still, keep out of the woods.